The vault door swung open with a heavy metallic groan. $5 million. 60 seconds. And a room full of executives who suddenly couldn't find their voices. Rewind 3 minutes. A manager in a $2,000 suit is laughing, pointing at a teenager in work boots. You really think a janitor's kid can crack what our best engineers couldn't touch? This ought to be entertaining. The Atlas safe stood in the center of Rexwell Financial's marble lobby. $500,000 of American-engineered steel, supposedly impenetrable. The challenge was simple. Open it, take home $5 million. Except nobody actually expected anyone to succeed. It was theater, a corporate flex disguised as generosity. But what happened next didn't just crack a safe. It shattered every assumption in that room about who gets to be brilliant, who deserves respect, and what intelligence actually looks like when you're not looking for it in the right places. If you've ever been underestimated because of where you came from or what you wore, you need to hear this story. Hit that like button, because what this 17-year-old did in less than a minute is about to change how you see the world. Rexwell Financials occupied 3 floors of Manhattan high-rise, where even the elevator buttons felt expensive. Marble everywhere. Glass walls that turned the city into art. The kind of place where your footsteps echoed differently depending on what you were worth. Milo had been wiping down those floors for 20 years. Every night after the traders went home, after the analysts powered down their triple monitor setups, after the executives stopped pretending the cleaning staff didn't exist, that's when Milo's shit began. He knew every corner of that building. The coffee stain on the 3rd floor conference table that never quite came out. The loose tile near the vault room that clicked when you stepped on it. The quiet. His son Arden was 17 and had his father's hands. Scarred knuckles, calluses in strange places, the kind of hands that knew tools better than textbooks. While other kids spent weekends at the mall, Arden haunted junkyards and estate sales, collecting old mechanical devices. Clocks, locks, safes, anything with gears and secrets inside. Milo taught him humility. Keep your head down, do good work, don't expect credit. But Arden taught his father something else. That curiosity doesn't need permission, and understanding how things work is its own kind of power. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Executives in tailored Italian suits who'd never changed a tire, analysts with Ivy League degrees who couldn't fix a jam copier, and in the corner, a janitor in coveralls with a son who could take apart a grandfather clock blindfolded and put it back together better than it was before. 2 worlds, same building, about to collide. Drop a comment if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who thought they were better than you. Because that invisibility, it's about to become a superpower. The company's 25th anniversary party was a kind of event where champagne costs more than monthly rent, and everyone pretends the excess is justified. Crystal glasses, imported cheese, a string quartet nobody listened to. The CEO, Richard Pemberton, stood on a temporary stage, soaking in applause like it was oxygen. 25 years of excellence, he announced, gesturing toward a massive object covered by black velvet. And to celebrate our commitment to security and innovation, I present our latest acquisition. The velvet dropped. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Atlas safe, Model 7700X, 6 feet tall, brushed steel, with a combination lock that looked like it belonged in a Cold War bunker. The thing weighed 3,000 pounds and had been engineered by a company that built vaults for the Federal Reserve. Here's the challenge, Pemberton continued, grinning like a game show host. Anyone who can open this safe walks away with $5 million. Cash. Tonight. The room erupted. Laughter. Excited chatter. Everyone knew it was impossible. That was the point. Corporate entertainment. A way to show off the firm's cutting-edge security while letting employees feel like they were part of something daring. People lined up immediately. Marcus from accounting tried every birthday he could remember. Jennifer from risk management used a stethoscope she'd borrowed from God knows where, pressing it against the steel like she'd seen in movies. Even Gerald, the outside security consultant they'd paid $12,000 for the installation, took his shot, spun the dial, listened, frowned, shook his head. One by one, they failed. The initial excitement curdled into frustration, then jokes, then the kind of forced laughter that fills awkward silence. That's when Thomas Pritchard, senior operations manager, spotted Milo near the back wall. The janitor had been trying to stay invisible, waiting for the event to end so he could clean up. Arden stood beside him, hands in his pockets, watching the spectacle with quiet intensity. Pritchard's voice cut through the noise. "Why don't we let the cleaning crew try? Maybe they got some hidden talents we don't know about." The laughter was immediate, cool, the kind that doesn't need explanation because everyone understands a joke. "You're not one of us." Arden felt his father's hand on his shoulder, a gentle pressure that said you don't have to do anything. But Arden wasn't looking at the manager. He was looking at the safe, at the manufacturer's plate riveted to the door. Atlas Safe Company, Model 7700X, manufactured in 1995. His breath caught. He knew that model. He'd read about it in a technical manual he'd found in a state sale 6 months ago. The manual that documented a specific manufacturing defect in the 95 production run. A misalignment in the gear mechanism that created a telltale double click when the tumblers rotated past the 12 o'clock position. Nobody else in this room would know that. Nobody else had spent their Saturday nights reading 40-year-old engineering documents by flashlight. If you're rooting for Arden right now, smash that subscribe button, because this quiet kid in secondhand clothes is about to teach a room full of millionaires what real intelligence looks like. Arden's heart hammered against his ribs. This was a moment every underestimated person knows. The split second where you can either stay safe in the shadows or step into the light and risk everything. He'd been mocked before. Middle school, high school, the kid whose dad was a janitor. The kid who smelled like cleaning supplies. The kid who brought mechanical pencils to auto shop because he couldn't afford the fancy German drafting set. He knew what happened when you stood out for the wrong reasons. But his father had also taught him something else. In their basement workshop, surrounded by disassembled clocks and salvaged motors, Milo once said, "Don't ever let someone else's limitations become yours. If you know you can do something, the only question is whether you're brave enough to prove it." Arden looked at the safe again, at the dial, at the manufacturer's mark. He knew the flaw. He'd studied the mechanism. The double click happened because of a 2.3 millimeter gap between the third and fourth gear plates. A manufacturing tolerance error that only affected units produced in August through October of 1995. The serial number on this safe would confirm it, but he didn't need to check. The model designation told him everything. Milo's hand was still on his shoulder. His father's voice, barely a whisper. "You don't have to prove anything to them, son." But maybe he needed to prove something to himself. Arden took a breath, stepped forward. The laughter died first, then the conversations, then everything else until the only sound in that massive lobby was the click of his worn sneakers on polished Italian marble. Every eye in the room tracked him, some curious, most amused, a few outright hostile, like his presence at the safe was an insult to their education and status. Thomas Pritchard muttered something to the person next to him. Arden caught the word embarrassing. He knelt in front of the safe. The steel was cold against his palms. Behind him, 200 people waited for the punchline. He wasn't going to give them one. Arden ignored the digital keypad mounted on the door. Everyone else had wasted time there, punching in random combinations like they were hacking a computer in a movie. But this safe was mechanical. Old school. The digital interface was just window dressing. The rail lock was analog, hidden behind the manufacturer's plate. He pressed his ear against the brushed steel surface, closed his eyes. The room shifted. Someone whispered, "Is he actually serious?" Another voice, "This is painful to watch." Thomas Pritchard's voice, louder than the rest, "We should stop this before it gets more embarrassing." But CEO Pemberton held up a hand. "Let him try. What's the harm?" What they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that Arden wasn't guessing. He was listening. Most people think safe-cracking is about force or algorithms or Hollywood-style espionage. But for mechanical locks, it's about sound, about feeling vibrations through steel, about knowing what you're listening for. Arden turned the dial slowly, clockwise first, past 0, past 10, past 20. At 37 degrees, he heard it, a soft click. Then, barely a fraction of a second later, another click, the double tap, the flaw. His pulse quickened. There it was. He continued turning, counting, listening for the pattern. The misaligned gear created a rhythmic irregularity, like a heartbeat with a murmur. Once you knew what to listen for, the safe practically told you its combination. 20 seconds had passed. Someone coughed. Nervous energy filled the space. 40 seconds. Arden reversed direction, counterclockwise, listening for the second number. The double click came again at 15 degrees. He marked it, continued. 50 seconds. The room was so quiet he could hear his own breathing. Milo stood at the back, hands clasped, face unreadable. But Arden knew his father well enough to see the pride there, buried beneath layers of protective worry. Clockwise again. Final number. The third gear plate. He turned slowly, precisely, listening for. There. 58 seconds. Arden gripped the handle. Applied pressure. For one terrifying moment, nothing happened. And he wondered if he'd miscalculated, if the flaw he'd read about was different than he remembered, if he was about to become the punchline after all. Then the mechanism released. A deep mechanical thunk that every person in that lobby felt in their chest. The door swung open. Silence. Complete. Suffocating. Absolute silence. Arden stood, turned to face the crowd. 200 faces stared back, frozen in various stages of disbelief. Mouths open, eyes wide. The kind of silence that happens when reality violates expectation so thoroughly that the brain needs a moment to recalibrate. Then chaos. That's impossible. There's no way. He had to have known the combination. Someone told him, this is a setup. Comment below, what would you have said in that moment if you were Arden? Because what he does next is the most powerful part of the entire story. Thomas Pritchard pushed through the crowd, his face red, not embarrassed, angry. This is obviously rigged. There's no legitimate way he could have. How did you do it? The CEO's voice cut through the noise. Richard Pemberton stood at the front of the crowd, not angry, but genuinely curious. He looked at Arden the way you look at something that doesn't fit your understanding of the world, like a puzzle that demands solving. Arden's voice was steady, quiet, but in that silent room, it carried. The Atlas 7700X has a manufacturing defect. Units produced between August and October 1995 have a 2.3 millimeter gap in the gear plate assembly. When the tumblers rotate past specific alignment points, you hear 2 clicks instead of 1. If you know what to listen for, the safe tells you its combination. The room stayed frozen. I read about it in a technical manual from an estate sale. It documented the recall that never happened because the company went bankrupt before they could fix it. Pemberton blinked. You learned that from a manual? I collect old mechanical documents. Clocks, safes, engines. I like understanding how things work. Someone in the crowd laughed. Not mockery this time, but the kind of disbelieving laugh that comes from having your entire worldview challenged. A 17-year-old kid in work boots had just done what their best engineers, analysts, and security consultants couldn't touch. And he'd done it by reading. Thomas Pritchard looked like he'd swallowed glass. This doesn't prove anything. Anyone could. Could what? Milo's voice, speaking up for the first time, silenced the manager. The janitor stepped forward, standing beside his son. Could spend years learning something nobody thought was worth knowing? Could study on their own time because they love understanding how the world fits together? Could outthink a room full of people who thought intelligence came with a degree and a title? The room shifted. Some faces showed shame, others resentment. A few, not many, but a few showed something like respect. Pemberton cleared his throat. A deal's a deal. The challenge was legitimate, and he solved it. He turned to his legal team. Draw up the check. Sir, surely we can. $5 million. Pemberton's voice left no room for argument. We made a promise in front of 200 witnesses. We honor it. But the CEO did something else, too. Something that mattered more than the money. He extended his hand to Arden. We have a partnership with MIT's engineering program. Full scholarship. room and board. If you're interested. Arden shook his hand. I'm interested. The crowd erupted into applause. Some genuine, some obligatory, all of it loud enough to fill the marble lobby. But Arden wasn't looking at them. He was looking at his father, at Milo, whose eyes were wet, whose calloused hands were shaking slightly, whose entire life had been built around the quiet dignity of work nobody noticed. I wasn't trying to prove them wrong, Arden said later, when the cameras came and the reporters asked for sound bites. I just knew I could help. That sentence, that simple, devastating sentence, captured everything the story was really about. Here's what this story actually means, beneath the spectacle and the $5 million and the David versus Goliath drama. Talent doesn't wear a price tag. It doesn't come with a pedigree or a diploma or the right zip code. It shows up in unexpected places, carried by people you've trained yourself not to see. The janitor's son who spent his weekends in junkyards learning mechanical systems. The quiet kid in the back of the room who read engineering manuals for fun. The person you walked past every single day without ever wondering what they knew, what they'd learned, what they could do if someone just gave them the chance. We live in a world that's obsessed with credentials, where we've convinced ourselves that intelligence only counts if it's been certified by the right institutions, validated by the right people, displayed in the right ways. But the most dangerous assumption you can make is that the people society has overlooked are actually worth overlooking. How many Ardens are out there right now? Sweeping floors in buildings where they're smarter than the people in the corner offices. Serving food to customers who don't make eye contact. Fixing cars for people who don't ask their names. How much genius are we wasting because we decided it only matters when it comes wrapped in the right package? The people you underestimate might be the ones who save you, the ones who solve the problems your experts couldn't crack, the ones who see solutions invisible to everyone who learned to think inside the lines. And here's the thing about listening, really listening, the way Arden pressed his ear against that steel and heard what nobody else could hear. It's a metaphor for something bigger. Most people go through life making noise, broadcasting, assuming, guessing. The rarest skill isn't talking. It's shutting up long enough to hear what the world is trying to tell you. Arden didn't crack that safe through force or cleverness or luck. He did it through patience, attention, and a willingness to learn from sources everyone else had dismissed as worthless. Old manuals, salvage machines, the kind of knowledge that doesn't show up on a resume, but shows up when it matters most. The story went viral, not because of the money, though that helped, but because it touched something universal. We've all been underestimated. We've all been in rooms where people looked through us instead of at us. We've all had moments where someone assumed we weren't smart enough, weren't qualified enough, weren't enough. This story says they were wrong. 10 years later, Rexwell Financial still displays that Atlas safe in their lobby. They've turned it into a legend, a reminder that the biggest security vulnerability isn't in your systems. It's in your assumptions. Arden graduated from MIT with degrees in mechanical engineering and computer science. He now runs a nonprofit that provides technical education to underserved communities, teaching kids from backgrounds like his that their curiosity matters, their intelligence counts, their potential exists whether or not anyone in power has noticed it yet. And Milo? He kept cleaning those floors. Not because he had to. His son offered to retire him a dozen times. But because he liked the work, liked the quiet, liked knowing that the degree hanging in Rexwell's main office, the one they framed and mounted as part of their diversity initiative, belonged to his son. The janitor's kid who wasn't supposed to amount to anything. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who's ever been counted out, looked over, or told they weren't good enough. Subscribe to Living While Black and Beyond for more stories that prove success has no dress code, genius has no prerequisites, and the people changing the world don't always look like the people who wrote the rules. And here's my challenge to you. Comment below with your hidden talent. The thing you're brilliant at that the world hasn't seen yet. The skill you've been developing in secret. The knowledge you've been accumulating that nobody thinks matters. Because it does matter. You matter. And somewhere out there's a vault that only you know how to open. Thank you for being here. For being part of this community where we celebrate the stories that don't make the highlight reels but change lives anyway. The stories about people who were told they didn't belong but prove that belonging isn't something you ask permission for. It's something you claim by showing up and doing the impossible. Your comments, your stories, the experiences you share, they make this channel what it is. A place where we see each other, where we recognize the Ardens in our own lives and in ourselves. Next week, I'm bringing you the story of a woman who walked into a boardroom with a 5th grade education and taught Harvard graduates how business actually works. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, you're not invisible. You never were. Some people just weren't looking in the right direction. Stay curious. Stay hungry. And never let someone else's blindness become your limitation.